Text Maria.
What do you want to say?
Hi, can you print me out one of those pricing strategies as well as the document I just sent you, period? I'll come down and grab it from the counter, period. Thanks, period.
Here's your message. Ready to send. Okay, it's sent.
Hi, guys.
How are you?
I couldn't be finer, Dan. Thank you for asking. So, our topic today is a relatively important one, and that is kind of really working with our sellers on strategies. And I've been thinking a lot about this very topic for the last week or so. I've had the opportunity to speak to some of our sellers. I've had the opportunity to speak to some of you. I've had the opportunity to kind of review our inventory, and just in case anyone thinks I live a really exciting life, this has been the main focal point in my brain for the last for the last 5 or 6 days. And so really what I wanted to do today was have more of a conversation with you guys to make sure that we're kind of all on the same page. I want to start by the way, if you have questions, you are able to unmute yourselves. Everyone's muted now, but if you just unmute yourself, and you can ask that question or participate. And so what I'd like to do is start with just a quick review of what our market conditions look like countywide. You'll have to do them for your own specific town or area depending on where you're listing, because it can certainly change area by area. And yet let's talk about what's going on countywide just to set kind of a foundation, right? We need to know where we're starting from. and then talk about some tools and talk about what I really want to do is kind of work through some strategies, right? Most of you on this call, I'm kind of looking up and down all the names. Most of you don't really need for us to sit together for an hour and run through how we have this conversation, right? We'll touch on pieces of that as we go through this. And so I wanted to not do just pull your 3 comps, have your list of actives, verify motivation, then go through the whole process and ask what the next step is. Like I'm not necessarily looking to do that with you today, because I think most of you have either heard that or are already doing that, right? And so instead, what I'd like to do is talk about what other strategies exist today that we can be talking with our sellers about. What can we offer them, knowing that we don't have a whole lot of control over what is going on, right? And so oftentimes we get put in that position of, hey, like, what else are you going to do? And let's be clear that sometimes the answer is there's not much more to do. Right? I mean, there's a reason that many of you feel that way with some of your listing clients. Like, I don't know what else they want me to do. Well, that's because there's nothing else for you to really be doing. And so what we have to do is we have to focus you so that you can focus them on strategies that get us through this next short-term period. And there's a couple of different choices that you and the sellers need to make as to how you come out the other side. And there are pros and cons to each. So my intent today is to kind of talk through that with you, with your full participation, hopefully, and really come up with those strategies and the pros and cons around each of those strategies. I have a whole ton of notes that I'll be working from that I will be adjusting as we talk, so that when we're done, I'll just email everybody on this call what the strategy 1, strategy 2, and strategy 3 and all the pros and cons with those strategies actually ended up being based on our conversation. How does that sound? Does that sound like a good game plan for the hour? Yes? Okay. Yeah. Rudy and Dan right now are my head nodders, so thank you, Rudy and Dan, for agreeing. I love that. All right, so let's do a quick review of, and this was about 15 minutes ago. As of about 15 minutes ago, this is the Fairfield County single family and condo market, right? And it's important, again, that we always start with facts, because regardless of what everyone is feeling or what sellers are hearing or what they're feeling or how they think things are going, right? Facts always kind of root us in a reality, and they ground us a little bit to be able to start conversations. I don't encourage you to have any conversation with any seller without knowing exactly what's going on in their particular town, and perhaps price point by price point within that town. Or you're just not prepared to have a conversation with them if you haven't checked that day. So I'm looking at 2 things for us. Because 2 things right now really underscore the scenario that our sellers find themselves in, and those are under contracts and listings taken, right? So what out there is going under agreement, at what rate, how quickly, how does it compare, what's the trend, and what about new listings to the market, right? Do you agree that each of those metrics is important to a seller for slightly different reasons?
Yes.
Right. So the listings taken obviously speaks to what's their competition, right? Are they kind of alone right now, or are more things coming on? How does that look? And the under contracts speaks specifically to the question I think I get asked the most by many of you, and by, I think, by your sellers. Is it worth being on the market? Is there a market? Are there showings happening? What's going on there? So let me give you these two metrics. For the first half of March, it's kind of an interesting metric. For the first half of March in Fairfield County, single family and condo, 261 properties went under agreement. In the second half of March, kind of after after this thing kind of crept in and started to affect us, we had 336 properties go under agreement, right? That trend made March relatively normal in terms of things going under agreement, even though the last half of it started to slide away from us, right? At least that's how it felt because we were doing things so differently. The results, just the numbers, were actually pretty normal for March, right? That's 500, almost 600 properties that went under agreement for an average of 149 a week in March. That's, again, not atypical. And so then to just compare it and trend us a little bit, again, 149 a week on average throughout the 4 weeks of March. And I compared that with last week, right? Because we're now through a full week of April. And so for the first week of April, which is the most recent data that we have, we had 117 properties go under agreement. So a decrease of 21% from the March average. So what does that tell you? This is where you talk. Yeah, good. Go ahead, Dan.
Me? Or
Yeah.
Dan?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, just from, I think, common sense approaches that probably the listings that were taken in January and February are the ones that are being closed in March. So, and since in March we got that COVID-19 scare, a lot of people haven't been as active in the marketplace as we'd like to be.
So what's interesting is that the properties, and I didn't dive deeper to see whether or not these particular properties, when they were listed, right? Because the measure of under contracts, let's remember, is really a measure of absorption. It's a measure of who's out there purchasing properties, right? So what else does it tell us? Go ahead, Kimberly.
Does it, with the, I think you said 21% increase, does that mean that there are less?
21% decrease.
That there are less buyers that are out there? Does that mean that the market is kind of slowing a little bit?
So it could mean that, right? It could mean that what we've seen in the last week, as opposed to all of March, is that there's fewer buyers out right now. It could mean that. I mean, the numbers say that fewer buyers actually pulled the trigger. That part is clear. So whether there's fewer buyers actually out, we can't really tell from these numbers. And yet, is it okay if we all just stipulate to the fact that fewer showings are happening right now? I mean, I don't think you need a number or calculus or any kind of anything else to pretty much state that factually, right? Go ahead, Donna.
So, I went and looked at
Go ahead, Donna, then Andy, then Barbara. Go ahead, Donna.
what it also says to me is looking at the trend of typically 9 per week, and now in the first full week of the new normal, going from 117 to 149 in this sort of crisis, it's not as bad as a lot of people want to make it out to be. There are still people, 117 of them, as opposed to 149 of them, who said, yes, I want to buy this house and went to deposit.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that's the good news. I don't think that's the bad news.
Yeah, agreed, right? And so you've heard me say this a couple of different times. Remember that down 21% is the same as saying 79% of normal is still there, right? And that's what Donna just said, more eloquently than I just said it. But the idea is, if it's down 21%, you can go into a tailspin about that if you want. That's just a fact, right? No, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is. The cool news about that is 79% of the market, as opposed to normal, is still out there buying, right? Go ahead, Andy, and then Barbara.
So what I did was I looked at what to show in the last 2 or 3 weeks compared to the weeks before that. And I didn't actually run the numbers. I mean, I was looking at a particular market because got a seller who's over 400 in Bethel, and he wanted to know, what was happening in that market. And what I found was that the, places did close, and they were all places that, had started back in February mostly. And that there's nothing that's gone from active to show in Bethel over 400K, or like, I don't know, maybe not nothing, but I think like if you went from 300 and up in Bethel, and you found like a couple that went under contract, not a week or so ago, but over 4 there was nothing. So I felt discouraged about, because it felt to me like what that says is that the kind of what we're talking about was the places that went under agreement back in January and February are what are closing now, rather than new buyers continuing to be out there and put places in the show.
Right. So to be clear, the numbers I gave you have nothing to do with closings, right? Because I don't think that's a valid or relevant metric. Closings are closings are closings, right? The valid metric is what went under agreement, which is where you started that conversation, Andy, right? And
right.
So absolutely look at town by town. You have to know what's going on town by town. And here's the thing: everyone within the sound of my voice, do not be discouraged by any of these numbers. You have to find encouragement, because if you yourself are discouraged by these numbers, it's impossible for you to communicate encouraging words to your clients, right? You will communicate the way you are feeling. So you've got to dive in and say, okay, how am I looking at the opposite side of this, right? How does that compare to last year? How does it compare to the previous weeks? You need to find data. Or if the data is simply that there was 17,000 things going under agreement in Bethel in the month of March, and in the last week now there's nothing, right? So if truly the market has come to a screeching halt by 100%, then you just get to have a conversation about the bang that's about to happen, because all that pent up demand has to be released at some point. Right, so be careful about discouraging when you're talking through all of this. And so, Donna, go ahead back, because I know you want to speak directly to what I'm saying, and then we have Alice, who I'm muting.
Just really quickly. So I'm watching Bethel as well as some towns that surround Bethel as well, and so the deposit is really interesting. The other buying signals are the number of properties that are coming onto the market. And I was surprised at, I don't have the number at the top of my head, but it was a significant, more than 5 new homes come on the market in Bethel. So that's good news. And the virtual and or live open houses that were hosted in Bethel this weekend. So there are a lot of buying, a lot of activity signs that are still out there.
Yeah, so those are great points to make to yourself, and then to your sellers. Go ahead, Alice.
Well, I was just going to say, I think the buyers are getting used to the new normal of no open houses, no viewing the houses in person. So I think there's probably a little lag time of them getting used to this new procedure.
I think that's a great point. Another great point to say, you know what, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here's what we're noticing. We're noticing that there is some decrease, and what we don't know yet is what the next week and the following week will really show us, because we could be just seeing that lag with people getting used to how we have to do this for the time being, right? Great point, great point. The other metric I want to throw out to you is listings taken, right? Which is what Donna just said. Is watching that listings taken number to see what the story is, and then translating that into factual, objective information. First half of March, 549 new listings to the market in Fairfield County, single family and condo. Second half of March, 401. Right, and we've done this before. We looked at this later in March. We knew it was slowing down. We knew week by week we were getting fewer and fewer properties come to the market throughout March as restrictions tightened. However, if you look at that as an average for March, that's an average of 238 a week in March in the county. Last week, 156 properties came on the market in Fairfield County. Same criteria, different week. So a drop of 34% of new inventory. But again, that still means that 66% of the inventory that would have shown up still showed up, right? More than half of the sellers who were about to become sellers decided to go for it anyway. As a matter of fact, 2/3 of them did, right? 2/3 of sellers didn't say, I'm going to bow out. That's an important statistic to recognize. Kimberly, give me half a second. And the other thing to remember is that when you're looking at one specific town, I think that's a slightly limited pool of information. And so I know your sellers are only located in one town, but most of you work with buyers who are not necessarily just looking in that one specific town, right? They may be looking in Bethel and New Fairfield and Brookfield and parts of Danbury, right? And so I think broadening that scope out a little bit to make sure that you're either using countywide information or greater Danbury or lower Fairfield County, or something that's a little broader to help people see what's real. It might also help you make better points inside of the specific town. Go ahead, Kimberly. And Barbara, you keep popping up, so go ahead, Barbara.
I just get the impression that people are just, I think it's going to be very good news in a couple of weeks, but I think a lot of people are just waiting for that curve to flatten, and then it's going to burst forth. That's the impression I get from both people who are, who have their house, a couple that I have on the market, and then people who are interested in buying. They just want to wait until they get to that place where this curve, like they see it in the next 2 weeks, that all of a sudden it's going to open up and they can go ahead and function a little more normally.
Yeah. So my first thought is, from your lips right to God's ears, Barbara. We're recording this. I'm going to send God the link because I want him to hear what you just said and take action on it, right? And I think that you're right. And I also think that we have to be cautious about what Barbara just said, right? And what I mean by that is, most people is not the same as all people, right? And we have to be really, really mindful of the fact that 117 people last week said, yes, I want to buy a house. And 156 people last week said, yes, I want to put my house on the market anyway, right? And so getting that feeling from people, which I do not dispute, because I get that same feeling from a lot of people I talk to. However, I have spoken to many of you, and I have spoken to some of your clients who aren't interested in taking a pause, right? And so we have to continue to help them understand that there is a market for them if they're uninterested in taking a pause, while at the same time helping them understand that it's not the same market, right? Because to have sellers who are expecting the same in April as last April and or next April to show up this April, they're on a different planet, right? Now that's not a script. Please don't write that down, right? The script isn't you're on a different planet, and yet if they have those expectations, we have to help them with different expectations. And so that's where some of our strategies come in. Can we move to our strategies? Would that be all right? And yet, do you see the importance of understanding what the numbers actually say? Do you see how it gives you a foundational a place to stand to have this whole other conversation on? If you didn't know what I just said, again, you have no business talking to sellers, right? Without that kind of information, because that's the information that is the foundation of any of these conversations. All righty, so I'm going to give you what I see as the 3 strategies that we can work on with our sellers right now, right? And so some of you are asking about price reductions. We're going to get to these strategies. It's going to answer all those questions for you. So strategy number 1, leave the house on the market and don't adjust the price. And so I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to preface it by saying this is a trick question. So here's my question. Leave the house on the market and don't adjust the price. Is that a valid strategy for a seller to take right now?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Right? And so that was the trick part, right? The answer is Yes, absolutely it is. It's 110% a valid strategy for them right now because we just don't, you know, sometimes we get, how do I say this? And with all the love in my heart for all of us, right? Sometimes we get so focused on either A, being right, or B, making sure people understand that we are concerned about their property and we think the better path is X, that we forget to step back from it and say, I wonder if there's a different path forward. I wonder if respecting someone's strategy to leave their house the way it is right now doesn't also make sense. So let's go through some pros and cons of, well, so let me give you the 3 strategies and then we'll go through the pros and cons, right? So that's strategy 1, leave the house on the market and don't adjust the price. Valid strategy for some of your sellers, right? The answer is always, it depends, because it depends on what they're trying to accomplish. Strategy number 2, leave the house on the market and adjust the price. Is that a valid strategy right now?
Sure, depending on what they want to accomplish.
Exactly right. Thank you, Stone, right? Clearly paying attention to what's going on, because we've got that whole idea of it depends, right? The answer, just for those of you who want to write down the rest of the answers, most of the rest of the answers for the rest of our time together is it depends. Everything has a right. There is no wrong, and it's just dependent upon timing and what people are looking for, right? So that's strategy number 2.
Motivation.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Right? What do you need to be a seller right now? If you don't, well, then there's a different strategy for you, right? And then strategy number 3, do whatever it takes to adjust your price now and not be left on the market later. That's a slightly different strategy than number 2. They're close, but it's a slightly different strategy. Now, is there strategy number 4, take the house off the market? Sure, there is, and we can spend a smidge of time on that. But that wasn't the whole gist of what the conversation was set up to be. The conversation was really more about having a price reduction conversation. So those 3 strategies for your sellers: leave the house on the market, don't adjust the price; leave the house on the market and adjust the price, or do whatever you need to do to adjust it wherever it needs to go for you to get a buyer right now and not be left on the market later. That's strategy number 3. So let's go back to strategy number 1. Leave the house on the market and don't adjust the price. What are the pros to that?
Well, it gives the seller some assurances from a psychological point of view if we give them confidence that it might still sell at that price.
Right. So yeah, there's some people who ultimately still want to sell. Right. And some of them are willing and able to hedge their bets that prices will not erode over the next few months. Right. It's one of the things that some of our sellers are fearful about. They're fearful that if they take action quickly now, and then the recession that's being predicted doesn't show up, and values don't erode like they did the last time this all happened, a shift that is, that somehow they'll be leaving money on the table, right? Is that a possible outcome of the next couple of months?
Yes.
It absolutely is. I'm not sure yet that I agree that it's probable. However, it certainly is possible. Go ahead, Donna.
Leaving it on and not adjusting a price. Another possible positive is that potential buyers are sitting at home with nothing to do, going through websites, and they will see the property and either be inclined to move to do something about it now, or at least be ready to, run out the door as soon as they feel comfortable to go out and rejoin life.
100%, right? So the pro of that strategy number 1 is that the buyers that are still out there right now still have an opportunity to see the house. right? You're not taking it off the market. So that's the argument of leaving it on versus not taking it off, right? Whether they're seeing it physically or virtually, they're still seeing the property. So that is definitely a pro to that approach. What else? Kimberly.
Actually, I had a question on we were on the seller's call. You said after 9/11, the market values dropped 18%.
On average throughout the county, yes.
On average throughout the county. What was it during the last shift that wasn't 9/11?
So that was the last shift. I don't have stats for after 9/11. Those stats were the last shift, 2008, 2009 through 2012. Values basically on average across the county dropped 18%.
Okay, sorry for the rabbit.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. And we are going.
I have a quick question, Rick, as well.
We are going to finish today with just kind of some simple facts that I want you all to know that will help you with these conversations, and that's one of them. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that. Go ahead, Lenka.
Sorry, Kimberly's question was very interesting, but I was also wondering, what's the time frame for, once the 9/11 happened and when we determined the 18.9 drop in the value, how quickly it happened?
Right. So and so to be clear, right, the 18% value drop on average
within our county
across the county was not after 9/11. It was after the last recession started, 2008, 2009.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So the last shift, just so we're all clear on that, and that was from the peak of the market. The last time it really was high was in October of 2006. I just want everyone to have that in their head. October of 2006 was the peak of that market. And then through 2007 and 2008, it started to kind of get wonky. 2008, November happened, the world fell apart, right? And then we were really into it. And so from that top to the bottom, which happened sometime between 2009 and 2011 or so, in that period of time, depending on where you were and what kind of property you owned, between that time and the bottom was about, on average, 18%. More closer to 23, 24% if you were above $1 million.
The only reason why I was asking that is because I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of my buyers in the last couple of weeks, and a lot of them, interestingly, have come with a conclusion that a lot of people are simply going to lose their homes, and especially the investors are waiting for that. Waiting for the shift of new wave of foreclosed properties. How do you see that happening?
So it's a great question, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tack that onto the tail end of our conversation because it fits more readily into some of the information I want to kind of bullet point for you before we finish. So hold just another 15 or so minutes on that. Let's get through these strategies, and I'll answer that question.
Rick, can I chime in? It's Bill Ferguson here.
Sure. Is it about the strategies, or is it about what Lenka just asked?
The strategies.
Okay, go for it.
Because there's so much uncertainty, and we don't know if it's going to be 18%, 8%. We just don't know what that number is. I think more importantly is the price that's being offered, is that the right price? Did they get the right CMA? Whose number is that? Was that the seller's number? Was that the suggested realtors? Because we don't know what the future is going to be.
Right. And so to Bill's point, that moves us right into the cons, right? The cons of, Bill just gave us the first con for leave the house on the market and don't adjust the price. Because if the house has been on the market already for 21 to 30 days prior to April 1st, you were due for this conversation anyway. Now, I'm not a fool. I live in the real world, and I know that many of you do not subscribe to that time frame. I will tell you, you would sell more properties faster if you did, and you'd have less frustrating conversations and less resentment of your sellers if you adopted that time frame and were upfront and clear with all of your sellers at the start of the listing to say every 21 days, we are going to sit and have a conversation about where we are and where we're going, or where we've been and where we're going. And that will include a review of the market. And by day 30, if it hasn't sold, the price gets adjusted, right? Most of you know that I am a huge proponent of 60-day listing agreements. Because if you're not willing to price your property the way it needs to be priced in order to find a buyer in 60 days, I'm not really all that interested in continuing to be your listing agent. So you get me for 60 days, which means we have to make really clear decisions together to get the job done. And the reason that works for you, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is because statistics show over and over and over again, this is not my opinion, that when you receive an offer in the first 21 to 30 days, you make more money. So I don't do that for me, I do that for you. Any questions? No? Great, sign here. So again, that's just me, right? When I get bored with what I'm doing and I dive back into the market and become a listing agent, that's my path. And it's a path that I will continue to suggest that you take, because any other path, you're having conversations with sellers out of sheer desperation to have a listing. You're not really having conversations with sellers about getting the job done for them quickly. Just my opinion. Well, it's my opinion underscored with a whole lot of fact, just to be clear, right? Because I can see some of you squirming and making like I smell garbage faces because of that comment, right? And I get it. I get that it's a challenge to some of the way that many of you work, and yet I truly and honestly believe that you would each be in a better position if you took a different tact forward with your seller clients. So back to Bill's point, one of the cons for this first strategy is you may not have the right number, right? And so if you're willing to just let it sit for another 30 or 45 days while we're working through the mess that's going on, outside, are you sure that that's even the right number to be appealing to people? If you were on for 21 to 30 days before April 1st and no one knocked on your door and said, I'd like to buy this house, I believe you already have that answer. Right? Some of you will struggle with this conversation because you just put the property on 2 or 3 weeks ago. Right there, that's the only, if you're on the market for 3 weeks and 2 of those 3 weeks were this, so maybe you get an extra 2 weeks, right? Maybe I'll give you an extra 2 weeks. But the idea is, if you look at the numbers that we went through, there were still people purchasing property. And so why didn't they purchase yours in the last 3 weeks when they purchased other people's properties, right? And I can tell you that the answer isn't because the half baths were wrong on Zillow, right? That's not the reason why. And I know some of you are banging your head against the wall because when people get frustrated, they start to micromanage and start to get really picky about everything else that doesn't matter because they want to avoid the thing that does. So another con from strategy 1 is just what we're talking about, frustration and sellers starting to grasp at straws to figure out why their property isn't getting shown or isn't selling, right? That's when you get to have those phone calls about it doesn't look nice. Will you take new pictures? The half baths are wrong on Zillow. Everyone goes to Zillow. How could we not be right on Zillow? Oh my goodness. Oh my, right? All that stuff that many of you start to hear, that's the reason. And it all goes back to the sellers have chosen a strategy that doesn't include making a change to the one thing that statistically shows will make a difference. And the last con to throw out on strategy number 1, which remember is leave your house on the market and don't adjust the price. The last con there is that you are hedging your bets that prices will not erode over the next few months. That was also a pro, right? Because if you hedge your bets and you're right, well, then you looked really smart. However, you have to also address that on the other side. That could also be a really big con, because if you don't take action now and the values do start to erode, Well, now you're running behind a rock rolling down the hill, right? You've got to try and figure out a way to get in front of it, which means more drastic moves once that starts to happen. So that's a pro and a con that I think I'll wait and figure it out, right? Strategy number 2, leave your house on the market and adjust the price. What are the pros to that?
Very similar to what Donna said. I personally have my own home on the market right now, and I just did a price reduction. But I can see on Zillow, Rick, that over 1,400 people have seen it, and 50 people have favorited it. So I know that there's probably buyers that maybe want to go see it, but just aren't ready right now.
Yeah. That's so well said, Marie. Thank you for that, because that's, and you see, you are smart. I always knew that about you, right? Because you made a decision as a seller, because let's all be clear, right? When real estate agents become sellers, they typically think more like sellers than they do like real estate agents. That's just you being human, right? And so I'm so proud and excited to hear you say that I took the step to reduce the price. You behaved like a real estate agent would, not a typical homeowner would, right? And the idea is, even if there are buyers out there and we raise the value, right? Because reducing the price raises the value of the house. So I want you all to get used to having conversations about raising the value. When you have a conversation about raising the value, any buyers out there who are serious all of a sudden show up. Who are serious and fearful to go out right now, as Marie just pointed out, she can monitor, she can see. They're like clicking away saying, ooh, that one. I hope it's still there, I hope it's still there, right? And she's building up all of this pent up demand that could well explode once restrictions are lifted and create multiple offers for her, right? Huge pros. By the way, another pro of just keeping the house on the market, whether you reduce the house or the price or not, is that you actually are still available to receive an offer, right? Off the market, generally speaking, you're not really all that available to receive an offer. Well, that was kind of all the pros all at once. See, Marie gave us one example, and it just took 4 or 5 pros and schmooped them all together. So thank you for that, Marie. What's the con? What's the con about taking a price reduction and leaving your house on the market right now?
Well, it shows that perhaps you're desperate.
Well, so I'm going to hold that desperation comment, Dan, for the next one, because the next one is really do whatever it takes to get that offer now, and I think that might have more of an air of desperation than not, and I'm going to call it something a little different. So hold that for me for half a second. Go ahead, Fiona.
You still might not get an offer.
Exactly right. Right. And so the con, and it's a con for both the seller and for us, is that you might take some version of a reduction and it might not be enough. Or the market might stall faster than we think it might stall, or restrictions may tighten and buyer pools may shrink even more, right? And so now everyone is trying to figure out, okay, did we do that? And since we did it, what was the point, right? Maybe we shouldn't have done it. People start to second guess that action. Go ahead, Jody.
So I was just going to say that it's, I guess, different way to put what Fiona said, that you're just not speaking to a large enough audience anymore.
Yeah, and that is possible. And at the same time, I think we have to make sure that we are always coming with real numbers to say that we may be speaking to an audience that is 79% of what it was earlier in March, right? And so I'm curious, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, knowing that the audience is still 79%, at least current statistics say the audience is still 79% of what it was, is that a path you want to go down, right? Because we don't get to make those choices for them. They get to make those choices once we arm them with this data. And I think that's important data. I'm going to underline that one more time to make sure that people understand that the audience isn't 20% of what it was. It's not even 50% of what it was. Today, it's still 79% of what it was, right? Almost a B in school. And so the con of taking that price adjustment really starts to show up if in fact no action comes after the fact, right? And what if prices don't, what if you took the price reduction and then we don't see an erosion of prices, right? It could make some people feel like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. But as we addressed with Marie's example, even if that happens, if the prices don't erode and suddenly you're like the rock star of value, the market may adjust for that, right? The market may well come to Marie and say, you know what, you didn't have to take that price reduction because we're going to pay you as if you did it because there's 3 people who now want that property and are willing to bid for it, right? It's hard to tell. It's unclear. It's unclear. Strategy number 3, do whatever it takes to get that property sold. What are the pros there?
I think you're ahead of the market should we experience a downside that we've seen historically.
Exactly right. Right. The biggest pro to getting it done right now is that you guard against recession. You get out before the going gets tough, right? Because we still see we have a version of a market today, and that's what we know, right? Trust me, we would all make way more money if we had accurate crystal balls. But we don't. Oh, I said that weird. An accurate crystal ball, right? And so yeah. Fiona just got that one. So recognize we don't have a crystal ball. And so it's impossible for any of us to know, right? It's funny, I hear some of our sellers saying to you or to me, you know what, I don't believe any of this. I don't believe any of this is going to happen. It's just going to all of a sudden turn off and then bounce right back. Well, I'm not sure that I agree with that. That's not what most of the experts that I'm listening to are saying is going to happen. And we're going to talk a little bit right at the end, which is just about now, in our last 15 minutes about that issue, right? About what are the experts saying? So even though we don't have a crystal ball, what is it likely to look like based on what we're hearing and seeing and what history has said, right? But certainly a pro is if you get rid of it now and it does, and the prices do erode, you get out from under that potential 18% value loss, right? I kind of look at it as like, let's do the math. If we're still looking at a 5% adjustment that needs to happen for your property, is a 5% adjustment now with an offer better than rolling the dice that your price erodes by more than 5%, knowing that many prices eroded by 3 or 4 times that amount the last time. And the 5% we're talking about isn't necessarily a 5% off of, the 10, 15, 18% that we're talking about is off of not your current asking price, but the actual value, right? Because we're talking about an erosion of values, not asking prices. So having those conversations to weigh the pros and cons, right? And not getting sucked into the conversation of, well, what do you think I should do, Jody, right? Because the answer is, it depends, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. It depends on A, your tolerance for risk, and B, what your motivation is. Here are the pros, here are the cons. What do you want to do? That's why we're structuring it this way for you today, to really have a pro and con conversation with your clients, right? So some other pros on strategy number 3, right? You do offer your property the best chance of locating a qualified buyer fast if you start to do whatever it takes, which means really price it that's price to cause it to sell, right? You find someone fast. You get the property under agreement before the rest of the inventory starts to pour back on once the restrictions are lifted, right? And so one of the things that has nothing to do necessarily with the possible erosion of prices is just an inventory issue. If you take action now and find your buyer, and you're now off the market before all the rest of the inventory comes on the market, do you see how that puts you in a more leveraged position as a seller, Mr. and Mrs. Seller? Make no mistake, the properties that we're not seeing, this 34% reduction in listings taken over the last week versus March, we will see them come on the market. They have not vanished for good. We're just going to see them once all the restrictions are lifted. And so do you really want to be a part of that game, or do you want to take advantage of less competition? It's like in hockey, right? When there's a power play. When somebody gets a penalty and is sent to the penalty box, the other team is now on a power play because they're up one person. I want everyone to be really impressed that I made a not just a sports analogy, but a hockey analogy, because I'm actually impressed with myself, right? But it is that same kind of idea, right? Where are you more likely to score a goal? When you have an extra person on the ice, or later when you're down? Right now you have somebody in the penalty box and the other team has the power play. When are you more likely to score the goal? Right? Alrighty. I'm so glad we recorded that, because no one will ever believe I used that as an example. And this is an important one. And
where did you even come up with that one, Rick?
Say it again, Jody.
How did you even come up with that?
I don't know. It's a scary place between these two ears. I don't know. Write this down, because I think this is a really important point. Serious sellers attract serious buyers. And that's a conversation for any of these strategies, right? And it goes back to the conversation of, if we make these moves, do we seem desperate? I would replace the word desperate with motivated, with serious. When we make these moves, we just are simply signaling to the world that we're serious sellers. And in my experience, what happens when you signal that you're a serious seller is that all of a sudden serious buyers show up. You can't necessarily draw a line from what I just said to sellers make less money, because that is not documented or substantiated with fact, right? Because oftentimes when someone gets really serious, as we said, Marie may experience that she got serious, and as soon as the restrictions are lifted, she's going to have multiple offers. I'm going to just keep saying that, Marie, to manifest it for you.
I love it. Keep it good.
Right? But that is a reality, right? So serious sellers simply attract serious buyers. Don't get mired down in the conversation of, we don't want to look desperate. You're right. You won't. You'll look serious. And that's what you want, because that's when serious buyers show up.
Rick?
So yes, Alice.
It's just like when people want to take their house off the market during the holidays, but those that stay on show that they are motivated, and they'll look for somebody, to come along who is just as motivated to buy.
That's a great example. It's not hockey, but it's a great example. Right? And Alice is so 100% right. This conversation is almost identical to the conversation around that November, December period of time where people are looking to remove themselves, right? What's driving it is different, and yet the conversation is the same. It's the same. So some simple facts, and Lenka, I will not forget to cycle back around to the question around investors and buyers. So some simple facts I want you to keep front and center. Number one, and these are not in any order of importance, and they will be part of what I send you on the tail end of this, so you don't have to write them down. Number one, we cannot sell a house for more than it's worth. That's just and I think that as soon as you as a listing agent can really internalize that it's not your fault, right? If you do a really crappy job of exposing the property, if the pictures are terrible, if you're careless with what you write or the data, right? That's on you. That's on you. But when you do all those things the way that up to a standard, and you expose the property at a level that is a standard for real estate, it's not really on you, right? Because at some point, there's not much more that can be done without the seller's involvement and agreement. The market tells you what your next action should be, always. That's why I am so rooted in 21 to 30 days as a concept of let's just set that expectation with our sellers and then hold them to those conversations, right? Mr. and Mrs. Seller, the people involved in this conversation, there are three of us, right? There's the two of you and there's me. Only two of us have the power to actually create the result you're looking for. And neither one of those people's name is Rick. Right? Because I don't get to make decisions that actually get us across the finish line. Only they do. So the market tells what the next action should be, not someone's bank account, not their pride, not your pride, and certainly nobody's plans, right? We have to make sure that we are focused on the market tells the story, not anything else. Most economists, including Lawrence Yun of NAR, he's the chief economist for NAR, and pretty much anyone else that I have chosen to listen to in the last couple of weeks, believes that this situation will result in some kind of a national recession. There are conflicting ideas about how deep that recession will be. However, I haven't seen anyone legitimate stand up and wave their arms and say everything's going to be fine. This is going to end and then everything's just going to bounce back. And here's how I know them to be right. If you just look at the issues around unemployment that this scenario have created, we're going to have some period of time where we have a problem. Because not every business is going to reopen. And not every business is going to rehire all of the employees that they let go of. People won't have businesses won't have the money. We will have fewer businesses because some will not survive this event. And the ones that do are going to be cautious around spending, right? And so unemployment is not just going to all of a sudden magically go back down to 3 or 4% once the restrictions are lifted. That is not going to happen. I think that's you're living in la la land if you really think that's going to happen, right? And so just because of that, we will have some kind of economic consequence of that. Maybe it's not a big deep crater, but we will have some economic consequence just because of the way this has affected employment. Our sellers are the only ones who make the decision. I already told you that. Trust that the plan that you have in place to get their property sold is a valid one. Write this down. We are not superhuman. We are not superhuman. You need to trust that what you do, as long as it's not crappy, right? When you're working off of a standard, that what you do does the job. 2,000 of our seller clients last year experienced what we do to get homes sold successfully. Your one seller isn't the exception to that rule, right? So know those numbers. If what we did was good for results for 2,000 people in the last 12 months, I just struggle understanding why it might not work for your property, right? The pricing strategies chart still works. I want to show you what that looks like really quick, just in case you don't remember. And it's this. Nope, it's not that. Hold on. Where is it? There it is. This selling strategies chart, it still works. It still works. So if there's no showings, you're like 10% off, 10 to 12% off. If you're getting just low showings, you're still off. If there are showings and no offers, you're still off. The only way you know it's actually priced right is if you're receiving offers, even now. Even now. Don't make sellers wrong. It's okay if we agree to disagree with them, right? And what I want to make sure is that you're not so focused on helping them that they feel like they're being beaten over the head with data and information, because that can start to make them feel like you're picking on them and making them wrong. Have simple, objective conversations. If they disagree with facts, you can certainly point out that those are facts, right? We can agree to disagree on the interpretation of those facts, but we don't get to disagree on the facts, right? The facts, the numbers say that under agreements are down 21% and still healthy at 79% of what they were. Those are just facts. We can disagree on what that actually says about your particular property. So start to separate these things out. Facts are facts, opinions are opinions, and everyone is entitled to their own opinion, including your sellers who it may seem to you are making bad decisions. They have a right to make those bad decisions. It's okay. And it's okay for you to say things to them like, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I so appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. It sounds like we may just need to agree to disagree on the best strategy forward. However, knowing this is your asset, you get to make that call. And I respect and support whatever call it is you make. Now, P.S., that doesn't mean I'm going to go and reinvent the wheel to try and find buyers out there or create showings that aren't happening, right? That the other side of that is also true, because the only way to create more interest is a value conversation if we're doing all the things that we say that we do. Do make some adjustments for the current market, and what that means is maybe you're doing more Facebook ads down in New York right now to attract people up here to specific houses, right? Maybe you're looking at opportunities for short-term rentals for some of your vacant properties, or long-term rentals. Maybe it's time for them to consider being a landlord, right? There are other opportunities and other paths you can go down as additional ideas to help them out of the scenario that they're in. But in terms of attracting a buyer, right, there's one thing that makes that happen. And of course, set proper expectations, right? That's really what we're talking about. The Lenka's question about buyers waiting, let's just address that real quick. And I can send you, when I send you these notes, I can send you what I wrote for, I forget who asked the question a week ago or so. I wrote 10 quick reasons why as an investor myself, I'm diving in right now. I am not waiting for anything, because what I know will happen is that all that inventory that's not coming on the market. Yeah, I know some of you ALC members, you have to go to your ALC meeting. And that's going to be on a different Zoom channel. So watch the time. Those investors are going to get stuck in a crush of inventory, right? And I don't necessarily mean inventory with listings. So maybe I shouldn't call it inventory. They're going to get stuck in a crush of buyers coming back to the market. And I don't want to be with all those buyers. I want to ferret out who's on the market now, because of what I said before, because serious sellers attract serious buyers. I am not going to sit around and wait to time the bottom of a market that I don't even know is coming. We just had a conversation that said prices may erode, and they may not. We are likely to head into some kind of economic recession. What that does to the housing market is impossible to know, because we just don't know how deep it's going to be and how long it's going to last. Uncertainty, I believe, as an investor, is my friend, because I can wield uncertainty as a weapon to purchase the way I want to purchase. Now, if you're working with investors who decide that they want to buy things for 20 or 25% below market, you can keep them. I'm not interested in those investors, and I'm not one of those investors. I am a realistic investor who understands that when the properties come on the market, right? If I can manipulate some version of at or below market, awesome. If the numbers still work and I have to buy at retail, I move ahead, right? So I'm either the stupidest investor that you all know, or I just don't let the market conditions stand in the way of me purchasing good real estate, because good real estate shows up whether or not the market is strong for sellers, shaky for sellers, or weak for sellers. Good properties still show up. And so I'm going to be ready right now to jump. And again, I'll send you that list of 10 other reasons why right now makes sense to do that. Interest rates are certainly one of them, right? So guys, that's pretty much what I have for you today. I hope this was differently helpful to kind of look at creating strategies with our sellers and really help them see the pros and cons of each strategy, so that we have a, I'll get there in a second, Fiona, so that we have a, are you raising your hand or are you clapping? Oh, I love that. I didn't know you could clap. Thank you for clapping. And so, so take this information and utilize it the way you need to. Remember, conversations with your sellers shouldn't be contentious. Shouldn't be contentious. What they should be is objective, right? And you can say things like, you know, it sounds like you're bringing a lot of emotion to this conversation. Trust me when I say to you, I completely understand. I own property here too. And even though I'm not a seller right now, I'm suffering the same way you are, right? Because if I had to be a seller tomorrow, I know the things I would have to do to get my property sold, right? Say and do things that align you with them. Don't make them wrong. Help them remember that you are not the hired help, right? Do not allow people to speak to you with this. Don't allow that. Nip that in the bud. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you know, I can tell, I can hear in your voice that you're upset. Let's make sure that in order for us to have a really valid conversation around the best path forward for you, that we're both upset with the same thing. And that's how the market is treating and reacting to your property. Because if what we're going to do is be upset with each other, that's not a good partnership, and it doesn't move us forward, right? We have to be on the same team looking at a common enemy. And that common enemy is how the market is reacting to your property. Right? Some of you get really guilty about this. I'm waving my magic mouse, right? To say, you don't get to feel guilty about this. It's not your fault. You didn't cause this to happen. And we're all doing the best that we can possibly do to help everyone forward through this. Some people struggle more than others, right? And we have to just respect that and figure out a way forward through it. Again, guys, I hope this was helpful. Have a great afternoon. Stone, did you have one last question?
I do, real quick. Could you throw back that slide up, the one whether the property was priced correctly? If not, how much it should be?
Absolutely can.
Thank you.
There you go. And what I'll do, guys, is as we sign off, I'll leave this on there. If you want, you know what? I'm gonna email this to both market centers. I'll just email this document so that you can print it off and have it ready for yourselves. I'll do that this afternoon so that you have it. I'll also leave it up as we say goodbye in case you want to take some notes on it. Guys, it's always my pleasure to spend time with you. Have fun, have a great afternoon, and I will see you at 4:30. Take care.
Oh, Rick,
Thanks a lot.
Rick, are you there? Did I catch?
Yes.
Oh, I emailed you. If you could just respond to that email because my client's waiting, that would be awesome.
You emailed me about?
Remember the buyer and the home inspection, that issue?
I did respond to that. I responded to that either late last night or early this morning, yeah.
Oh, it didn't flag me. I have you on VIP. I'm sorry. I'll go look for it. Thank you.
Sure,
Okay.
if you don't have it, text me and I'll resend it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Rick, Bill Ferguson here. One quick thing.
Yeah.
On this chart you have up there, what is the time? I understand the 4 scenarios, but 6 days, 12 days, 21 days. Does that fit into this chart?
So yeah, what my version of what you're asking, Bill, is 21 to 30 days, right? Except if you're listing in the high end, then you maybe get 45 to 60 days, just knowing that the high end of our market right now is just far more sluggish, right? And so it's probably fairer to give people in the high end a little bit more wiggle room, and yet really motivated people in the high end, I would still say 21 to 30 days. Every 30 days, if you're not looking at this and making an adjustment, you're not paying attention to what the market is telling you and falling further and further behind.
Thank you. Understood.
You're welcome. Guys, have a great afternoon. I'll see you at 4:30.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.